Homer Price, Chapter 2, The Case of the Cosmic Comic. One Saturday afternoon, Homer and Freddie's little brother Louie were listening to the state college football game on the radio. After the game, Homer said, "I'm feeling sort of hungry. Come on, Freddie. Come on, Louie. Let's go down to the kitchen and get something to eat." They went downstairs and Homer poured out 3 glasses of milk, and Homer's mother brought out the cookie jar. "Don't eat too many cookies," she cautioned, "because it's almost dinner time." "No, ma'am, we won't," said Freddie. Then he said to Homer, "Has tonight's newspaper come yet?" "I think so," said Homer. "Yes, there it is, on top of the refrigerator." "Oh, boy," said Freddie as he opened it to the comic page. "Let's see what happened to the Super Duper." So Freddie and little brother Louie and Homer gathered around the paper to see how the Super Duper was going to get out of the big steel box filled with dynamite, where the villain had put him and dropped him into the middle of the ocean from an airship. There in the first picture, the Super Duper was saying, "Ha, ha, that villain thinks he can get rid of me, but he's mistaken." Then, in the next picture, the dynamite exploded and blew the steel box to bits. But that didn't hurt the Super Duper, because the Super Duper is so tough, tougher than steel, that nothing can hurt him. "Just look at those muscles and that chest the Super Duper's got," said Freddie, before going on to the next picture. In the next picture, the Super Duper bounded up from the bottom of the ocean and went whizzing through the air. He caught the airship by the tail and broke it off with a loud crack. In the last picture, the villain was trying to escape in an airplane and was machine gunning the Super Duper, but the bullets were just bouncing off his chest because he was so tough. Then it said, "Continued on Monday." "Boy," said Freddie, "the Super Duper can do anything." "Yeah, but it's only a story," said Homer, "and the story's always the same. The Super Duper always hits things and breaks them up, and a villain always tries to bomb them or shoot them with a cannon or a gun or an electric ray. Then he always rescues the pretty girl and gets the villain in the end." "Well, it isn't just a story," said Freddie, "because Super Duper's in the movies too. They really take movies of him lifting battleships with one hand and even flying through space." "Ah," said Homer, "I read a book once that said they do that sort of thing with wires and mirrors. It's just trick photography. That's all it is." Then little brother Louie, who had been eating cookies all this time, said, "Read it to me." So Freddie had to read it all over again, out loud, and explain the story to little Louie. "Freddie," called Homer's mother, "your mother just phoned and wants you to bring little Louie right home." "Okay. Come on, Louie, finish your milk." "Goodbye, Homer, and thank you for the cookies." The next time Freddie came over to visit Homer, he brought along some of his Super Duper comic magazines. "Hey, Homer, I thought you might like to look at these," said Freddie. "Gosh, Freddie, you certainly have a lot of these comic magazines," said Homer. "They don't cost much," said Freddie. "Only 10 cents apiece. Here, read this one, Homer. It's the most exciting." Homer took the comic magazine and started to read, while Freddie looked over his shoulder. At the beginning of the story, the Super Duper was dressed in ordinary clothes, just like any other man. Then, after the villain appeared on the second page, the Super Duper slipped behind a tree and changed into red tights and a long blue cape. "Why does he always change his clothes like that?" asked Homer. "That's because he's so modest," said Freddie in a knowing way. Homer started reading again. After the Super Duper had changed his clothes, he started flying through space and smashing things. He picked up automobiles and tossed them over cliffs, and he even carried a train across a river after the villain had blown up the bridge. Then finally, he saved the pretty girl from a horrible death and caught the villain, who turned out to be a very notorious criminal. Gosh, Freddie, these Super Duper stories are all the same, said Homer. No, they're not, said Freddie. Sometimes the Super Duper smashes airships, and sometimes he smashes ocean liners. Then, other times, he just breaks up mountains. But he always rescues the pretty girl and catches the villain on the last page, said Homer. Of course, said Freddie. That's to show that crime does not pay. Shucks, said Homer. Let's go pitch horseshoes. Okay, said Freddie. Freddie won 2 games out of 3, and then he said, Guess it's almost supper time. See you tomorrow, Homer. Yep. Bye, Freddie, said Homer. And Freddie gathered up his comic magazines and went up the road home. After supper, when Homer was doing his homework, the phone rang. Hello, said Homer. Hello, that you, Homer? This is Freddie. Say, did you see in the paper tonight that there's going to be a Super Duper movie over at the Canterbury Theater next Saturday afternoon? Before Homer could say, No, I didn't, Freddie shouted, And guess what? The Super Duper in person is going to be there. And Homer, Freddie went on, Mother has a box from the mail order house over at the Centerburg Railroad Station. So Dad says that little Louie and I can take the horse and wagon and drive to Centerburg on Saturday. We can get the box and then go see the Super Duper. I thought you might like to come along. Sure thing, said Homer. Okay, we'll stop by for you, said Freddie. Bye, Homer. On Saturday, Freddie and little Louie drove up to Homer's house with old Lucy hitched to the wagon, just as Homer was finishing his lunch. I thought we'd better get an early start, said Freddie, because it takes old Lucy about an hour to go as far as Centerburg. I'll be ready in just a second, said Homer. Then, after Homer had climbed in, Freddie said, Giddy up, to old Lucy, and they started off to see the Super Duper in person. When they arrived in Centerburg, the first thing they did was go to the station and load the box from the mail order house onto the back of the wagon. Gosh, that's heavy, said Homer as they lifted it on. Yeah, said Freddie, but I bet you the Super Duper could lift it with his little finger. Maybe so, said Homer. Let's stop over at Uncle Ulysses' lunchroom and get some donuts to eat in the movie. Freddie and little Louie both thought that was a good idea, so they drove old Lucy round to the lunchroom to get some donuts. Then Freddie and little Louie and Homer walked across the town square to the movie. The Super Duper's super streamlined car was standing in front of the theater. It was long and red with chromium trimmings, and it had the Super Duper's monogram on the side. After they had admired the car, they bought 3 tickets and went inside. There in the lobby was the real, honest-to-goodness Super Duper. He shook hands with Freddie and Homer and little brother Louie, and he autographed a card for Freddie, too. Mr. Super Duper, would you please do a little flying through space for us, or maybe just bend a few horseshoes? Asked Freddie. I'm sorry, boys, but I haven't time today, said the Super Duper with a smile. So Homer and Freddie and little Louie found 3 good seats and ate donuts until the picture began. The picture was called The Super Duper and the Electric Ray. That was because the villain had a machine that produced an electric ray, and every time he shined it on a skyscraper or an airplane, the skyscraper or the airplane would explode. He turned the ray on Super Duper 2, but of course, the Super Duper was so tough that it didn't hurt him. Little Louie got so excited, though, that he choked on a donut, and Homer had to take him to the lobby for a drink of water. But finally, the Super Duper broke the villain's headquarters to bits and lifted the ray machine, which must have weighed several tons, and tossed it over a cliff. Then he caught the villain and rescued the pretty girl. But at the very end, the villain slipped away again, and then these words appeared on the screen. Next installment, next Saturday afternoon. Why did the Super Duper let the villain get away again? Asked little Louie on the way out. I guess that's because he wants to chase him again next Saturday, said Homer. Outside, they admired the Super Duper's car once more and then started home in the wagon. It was evening by the time old Lucy, pulling the wagon with Freddie and little Louie and Homer on it, had reached the curve in the road just before you come to Homer's father's filling station. A car honked from behind, and Freddie pulled old Lucy over to the edge of the road. Then, swoosh! Around from the rear sped a long red car with chromium trimmings. Gosh, it's the Super Duper, said Freddie. Well, he shouldn't drive so fast around this curve, said Homer, sort of doubtful like. Almost before Homer had finished speaking, there was a loud screech of brakes, and then a loud crash. Giddy up, Lucy, said Freddie. We better hurry up and see what happened. Gee, there weren't any cars coming the other way, said Homer. I wonder what happened. Golly, said Freddie in a quavery voice. Do you suppose the electric ray? Wow. Lucy. Woo! Lucy, we better park here. Oh, shucks, said Homer in his bravest voice. I'm going to see what happened. Little Louie began to cry, and Homer tried to comfort him. Louie, that electric ray business was just part of a movie, and it couldn't have anything to do with this. Homer tried hard to make it sound convincing. Then Homer and Freddie and little Louie got out of the wagon and crept along the side of the road. There, around the curve, was the Super Duper's car down in a ditch. All three boys stopped crawling along and lay down on their stomachs to watch. Oh boy, whispered Freddie. Now we'll get to see the Super Duper lift it back on the road with one hand. There was a flash of light, and little Louie cried, Is that the electric ray? It's only the headlights of a car, said Homer. Come on, let's go a little closer. They crept a little closer. They could see the Super Duper now, sitting there in the twilight with his head in his hands. I wonder if he got hurt, asked Homer. Nah, whispered Freddie. Nothing can hurt the Super Duper because he's too tough. Well, if he isn't hurt, why doesn't he lift the car back on the road? Asked Homer. Shh, said Freddie. He's an awful modest fellow. So they waited and watched from the bushes. The Super Duper sighed a couple of times, and then he got up and started walking around his car. Now watch, said Freddie in a loud whisper. Oh boy! Oh boy! The Super Duper didn't lift the car. No, not yet. He looked at the dent that a fence post had made in his shiny red fender. And then the incredible happened. The colossal, gigantic, antic Super Duper, that same Super Duper who defied the elements, who was so strong that he broke up battleships like toothpicks, who was so tough that cannonballs bounced off his chest. Yes, who was tougher than steel. He stooped down and said, Ouch! Yes, there could be no mistake. He said it again louder. Ouch! The great Super Duper had gotten himself caught on a barbed wire fence. Well, for crying out loud, said Freddie. What happened? Asked little Louie. Did he get himself rayed by the villain? Come on, Freddie. Let's go and untangle him, said Homer. Then Freddie and little Louie and Homer unsnagged the Super Duper, and he sighed again and said, Thank you, boys. Do you know if there's a garage near here? It looks as though it will take a wrecking car to get my car out of this ditch. Sure, my father has a garage down at the crossing, said Homer. And we have a horse right up there on the road. We could pull your car out of the ditch, said Freddie. Well, now, isn't that lucky, said the Super Duper with a smile. So they hitched old Lucy to the car, and she pulled, and everybody pushed until the car was back on the road. Little Louie sat with the Super Duper in his car, and Homer and Freddie rode on old Lucy's back while she towed the car toward Homer's father's filling station. What happened, Mr. Super Duper? Did the villain ray you? Asked little Louie. No, said the Super Duper, and he laughed. When I drove around the curve, there was a skunk right in the middle of the road. I didn't want to hit him and get this new car all smelled up, so I went into the ditch. Ha! Ha! When they'd reached the filling station, they put some iodine on the scratches that the barbed wire had made on the Super Duper. He made faces just like anybody else when it was dabbed on. Then he ate a hamburger, and by that time, Homer's father had the car fixed, except for the dent in the fender. Before the Super Duper drove away, he thanked the boys and made them a present of a large stack of Super Duper comic books. After he'd gone, Homer and Freddie went back with old Lucy to get the wagon. Well, anyway, Freddie, we've got a complete set of Super Duper comic books, said Homer. Yeah, said Freddie. Then he said, Say, Homer, do me a favor, will you? And don't tell anybody about the Super Duper and the barbed wire and the ditch and the iodine, especially Artie Bush. If he doesn't hear about this, I might be able to trade my comic books for that baseball bat of the Louisville Slugger, that's only slightly cracked. Okay, said Homer. Come to think of it, his cousin Skinny has a pretty good ball, too. This is a good time to get even for the time Skinny traded me a bicycle bell that wouldn't ring for my nearly new bugle. Next up, the donuts.